All right, welcome back to another episode of the Investigating Pathways podcast. Today I'm joined by my guest, Slava Rubin, the founder of the crowdfunding platform Indiegogo, the VC firm Humbitionvc, and most recently, Vincent Alternative Investments. Slava, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited for it.
Absolutely. So, Slava, I want to start off a little bit with your origin story. So could you describe your life as a kid leading up to your time in college?
Sure. I was born in Belarus, so the former Soviet Union, born in 78, came over to America when I was 6 months old. I lived in Brooklyn, and when I was 7, we moved to Pennsylvania, Northeast Pennsylvania, Scranton-Wilkes-Barre. My mom's a doctor, and she got her residency there. Went through private school through 8th grade, and then went to public high school. And then my dad passed away when I was in high school, actually, and then went to college at University of Pennsylvania to the Wharton School.
Gotcha. So could you describe your college experience while at Penn?
I mean, college was great. I'm a big fan of college. I was doing lots of stuff beyond what was probably the main reason to be there, which is learning or, doing my studies. Definitely learning either way, but I studied abroad. I played 1 year of football, played multiple years of rugby, was involved in a professional fraternity, a social fraternity, lots of friends, lots of hanging out, did work, both like the student work required, but also work to make money. Yeah, I loved it. I thought college was great. And definitely that's the transition of growing up. And I think I did a lot of growing up for sure.
Awesome. So immediately post-college, I know you worked a number of consulting and analysis jobs, actually even during college. So were there any super impactful or I guess interesting experiences during those times that sort of impacted you as an entrepreneur later on?
I mean, they all helped mold me for who I am. But yeah, I interned for an investment management company while I was at Wharton in Philadelphia. And then when I was studying abroad, I stayed in Europe and I interned for Cisco Systems, which that was back in 99, which was, one of the hottest companies at the time. And yeah, I mean, you learn through all of your experiences and everything just keeps on challenging you. And hopefully the curve is steep. And as part of the curve being steep, you get to really keep ramping up. And absolutely, those things all helped to become the entrepreneur. I would say that one of the key challenges in being an entrepreneur is the willingness to accept failure or to take on things that you're not used to. And I was always pretty excited to take on new challenges and to learn from my mistakes, let's call it, or for my lack of knowledge and trying to ramp up quickly.
Awesome. Got it. So now let's get into the time when you launched Indiegogo. So to start off with, why did you sort of decide to become an entrepreneur? You went from your typical job at the firm to deciding to launch a company. So was it sort of a goal of yours since you were young, or was there some sort of other motivation?
Yeah, I was always pretty entrepreneurial since I was younger. I really was into trading cards. So now trading cards are pretty hip and cool again. It took a while, but when I was a kid, how old are you now?
15.
How old?
15.
16. So I was about, I think, like about 12, 13, maybe even a little younger, that I really started getting into cards. And what was really fun is they had prices. Like you can get a card that was worth a quarter, or you could get a card that was worth $10. And sometimes the cards went up from like $1 to $10 in a few months. And I was too young to be able to invest in the stock market at the time. And I just thought that this is my way of quote unquote investing. And it was really fun to, it's kind of gambling, kind of not.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things were not legal and were not even allowed for a kid under 18. And I just thought, I know a lot about sports. And, I started taking some of these risks, which is instead of just randomly getting one card out of a pack, I would purposely buy the Kembe Mutombo rookie and buy, 10 of them. And I would try to buy them for $3 and then try to sell them for $10. And that's $7 a profit times 10. That's $70 right there for some young kid. That was real money. And I would do that then every weekend. I would go to a show. I would go to a hotel or mall that was having some card show, and I would make money. And I remember my mom would drop me off because I couldn't drive you. She said, "You need any money for lunch or to hang out?" I'm like, "No, I'm good." And I'd be like pocketing hundreds of dollars, like
And you
over the
just make the
course.
money on your own.
Yeah, over the course of the weekend, the Saturday and Sunday, going to show back-to-back days, I'd make like real money. And I really enjoyed that because there wasn't like a job, which is called guy going to figure out which cards to buy and which ones to sell and who to try to sell them to. That I didn't know that was entrepreneurial. Now I know it is. And that kind of experience was really fun. And I just thought to myself, I want to do more of that when I get older. So I did study entrepreneurial management as one of my majors at Wharton, but it wasn't until Indiegogo that I really, really, really exercised the entrepreneurial capabilities as it relates to like a real business. Before that, I did start a nonprofit, which is also entrepreneurial, but not in the sense of commercial entrepreneurship. So yeah, always since I was a kid, I thought that creating your own path, figuring out yourself, having to take all these random pieces of information and trying to create a solution was super fun, as opposed to getting the picture paint by numbers and then having to follow somebody else's rules as to how to paint it.
Yeah. Gotcha. So I'm curious, where did the inspiration for building a crowdfunding platform come from in the first place?
Yeah, so there's myself and my two founders, Danae and Eric. The original idea came from Danae. So she was an investment banker, and Eric and I both were consultants. And she had seen that people would come to her as the investment banker, as like the gatekeeper to cash. And she had this idea about why not create a fund where the people that invest in the fund can then vote on how they allocate the investments and where they put the money. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting idea. Now, YouTube was brand new. This is 2006, which is a long time ago. You probably were like born in 2006 or like
Yeah,
2000.
2005.
There you go. And and most people actually didn't know what YouTube was yet. It wasn't owned by Google, which is probably hard for you to believe. And there was also this other company called Prosper that was doing kind of peer-to-peer loans. And I said, if you want to change the finance industry, you can't do it in the finance industry. And she said, no, I want to create a fund where the people, and I'm like, I heard you. I didn't know who she was. I got introduced to her through Eric, who just met her at business school. And I said, well, if you want to change the finance industry, you can't do it in the finance industry. Then she repeated again what it was. And I said, yeah, I think you want to do something like this. And I showed her YouTube, and she's a fan of basketball. And I showed her some highlights that happened from last night. It's like, wow, how did you pull these up so fast? And I was like, oh, people post this stuff on YouTube. Well, who posted it? I'm like, anybody. Well, how did you find it? Well, you just search for stuff. Or, well, how does it surface even more? Well, depending on who likes what and how many views something gets, it might get discovered more and gets into the search engine algorithm. She's like, yeah, this is really cool. I'm like, you want to do this for money. You kind of want to let anybody do this, but then like ask for money associated with it. It's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm like, yeah, that's not a finance company. That's a tech company going after finance.
Yeah,
So that's how we evolved.
gotcha. And so I have to ask, how did you all settle on the name Indiegogo?
Great question. Our back in the old days, we were just using a code name called Project Kayaku, which was just our code name for our idea, and we really needed a name, and we kept on coming up with all kinds of different names and all kinds of different URLs. And then finally we got this awesome media hit that somebody wanted to write this awesome article. We're like, are we going to say Project Kayaku? Like, we really need to have a name. And then Eric, my other co-founder, was thinking of different names, and he came up with Indiegogo, like kind of this bar whiskey a go-go, kind of like fun and active, and it's interesting, like the independent spirit. So we thought the India would be a little confusing, so we took out the and just kept the Indiegogo and had the indie kind of crashing with the go-go. A lot of people think of indie as like indie films, And it's not really that. It's really just the independent spirit. And with the independent spirit, anybody can do anything. And we thought it'd be fun kind of with the movement of the go and the go, just kind of crashing together. So we just came up with the name Indiegogo. And I think it cost like $9 or something to buy the name, which, these days, and even back then, URLs were super expensive. So we were like, cool, nice and cheap. And then the media person said, what's your name? And we said, Indiegogo. And they're like, okay, that's cool.
Gotcha. That's very interesting. So, for all three of you, when you first launched the company, what was the vision and what were you sort of trying to achieve in the crowdfunding space?
It was always about removing the gatekeeper and trying to use technology and the internet to democratize access to capital. And we're really proud of what's been accomplished. I mean, now we've served virtually every country of the world and distributed billions of dollars and empowered, so many entrepreneurs to do so many incredible things.
Gotcha. So now I want to talk about your transition sort of away from a day-to-day role in Indiegogo and further to moving at the time Humbition, your venture capital firm. So first off, sort of what motivated you to move away from as active of a role at Indiegogo and work more actively on building a venture firm instead of, maybe going back to another firm, just being like a board member, building, I don't know, another company, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So, like we mentioned, I started Indiegogo basically when you were born. So it's been a long time, and was CEO there for well over a decade, had really incredible growth. Really saw the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs and start a fund. So really that was the inspiration. Still very involved at the board level, put in a great CEO and start angel investing about, I think like 8 years ago now. And I always thought it's been really exciting to mentor, support, and work with entrepreneurs. And obviously at Indiegogo, that's what I do as well and have done. And this just created a new platform to do that, to really be able to invest much more meaningful dollar sizes and try to support entrepreneurs just like other investors try to support me.
Gotcha. So obviously, by this time, I'm assuming you were a relatively well-established entrepreneur. Indiegogo was successful. You were doing well with it. So reflecting that, what was the process sort of raising your first fund in venture capital?
Yeah, I mean, raising any money from anybody is always hard. Raising a fund is completely different animal than raising money for a company. And raising a first fund is super hard because usually raising a fund, you want to use proof and evidence as to how you
Yeah.
can raise more money. And if there's no evidence, it's hard to do. My partner, Cyrus Masumi, who created ZocDoc, and I did have evidence as angel investors, not as fund investors. So, like I mentioned, we both have been investing as angels for about 8 years now, and have really had a great track record. We've invested in several unicorns, sometimes first money in, sometimes super early. So we were able to parlay that and our connections and our experience for having both been CEOs for over a decade to pull together a $30 million fund. It definitely was not easy, but like anything in entrepreneurship, often they're not easy, and you have to persevere through it and have the grit and the wherewithal to make it happen. And that, I would say, is a lot of what entrepreneurship is all about.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, with the strike of COVID, how did your investing sort of change? Did you have to put in fewer checks? Were you seeing more companies coming to you? What was that landscape shift looking like?
Well, as a venture investor, often you're investing into company, and we're investing early, like seed and A. So we call it serious seed, which is a threshold of like $250,000 of run rate revenue. So these companies are often quite young when we're investing into them. So we're looking at probably 5, 6, 10 years before those results are going to happen. So when COVID hit, it didn't change actually too much the investment strategy, because already we were looking at very young companies that were going to be very progressive, forward thinking.
Yeah.
What did happen is we didn't know what was going to happen at a global macro level in terms of whether or not people were going to be investing or not investing or making companies or spending money. So we definitely kind of sat back for a few months and wanted to see how things were going to shake out. And then actually things really started to pick up as people understood that you can work remotely, using Zoom is cool. People are going to be able to keep on advancing their companies. People are still going to be buying stuff. Not everything the same, like with travel, but spending behaviors in different directions. And we really saw a lot of action starting in the latter part of last year, going all the way through now. It's been a very hot market, actually, to be an entrepreneur. I would say massively entrepreneur friendly. So in terms of the types of companies we're investing in, it hasn't really changed because we were always so forward looking. And with Cyrus's background with ZocDoc, we were already investing into health tech even before COVID. Now health tech is as hot as ever, but we were already part of that trend even before. So having access there has been great. So obviously COVID has had its challenges and has been really difficult. And we're starting to see the other side here in America. But I would say our investing, approach has been quite consistent.
Gotcha. And so I have to ask again, just because the name is so unique, where did the name Humbition come from, like the inspiration?
Yeah, so it stands for humble and ambition put together. So
Ah,
it's
gotcha.
our own made up word. So really, there's lots of traits that any early stage entrepreneur can have that are important, but to us, those two traits are probably some of the most important. And the key is actually the balancing act between those two traits. That is the key. If you're too humble, you won't accomplish enough and have enough ambition. If you're too ambitious, you won't be able to hire the best and work with the best because you're not humble enough. So having the right balancing act of ambition is really something we look for as part of investing into entrepreneurs.
Gotcha. Okay, that's very unique combination of two words. I like it. So now I want to talk about the latest company you're working on, which is Vincent Alternative Investments. And so I'm curious, sort of what got you back into the world of entrepreneurship? A lot of founders I've talked to, they're like, I don't want to make the hellish journey again. I don't want to build the company again. I'm fine with my successful company, right? So what sort of got you back into the world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, being an entrepreneur is hard. It's kind of like being a parent. Um, in the early days, being a parent, there's a lot of pain involved. And then when they grow up, you kind of forget what it's like. And then you go through it again. You're like, why am I doing this again? But yeah, 0 to 1 is really exciting. Going from complete inception of an idea and creating reality of a product that others use is such a amazing experience. And I was talking with my now co-founders with Vincent, and we were just talking about what the idea could be and what the opportunity was. And I just thought, let's go after it. And instead of being CEO this time, I put in an entire executive team, great leaders, a CEO, a COO, and a CTO. And I'm exec chairman and I've been working with them day to day. But operating, there's nothing like operating. It's all the highs and all the lows associated with it. You can't compare it to anything else, which I actually personally like the balancing act of being both an investor and an operator. It kind of keeps me
Mhm.
on both sides of the equation. So yeah, it's hard. Starting companies is hard. And like we mentioned before, you need to have the grit and the ambition to want to work through it.
Gotcha. So obviously, a lot of alternative assets have grown in popularity over the past few months, right? Specifically, the NFT market. It's been around for like what 2, 3 years. NFTs have existed, but over the last like what 6 months, I would say since January, we've really seen an uptick in the number of NFTs being created, sold, used, et cetera, et cetera. So how has that changed the way that you've thought about building the business and the company as a whole?
Yeah. So the idea for Vincent with Vincent.com is alternatives are growing very rapidly. Not enough people have access to alternatives or included in their portfolio. People have been trained very well to have a savings account, a checking account, maybe a retirement account, and they often will have a mix of equities and savings, but they're not going to have much alternatives. Now, family offices and the rich, the ultra high net worth, and the people that have really make their money work for them know that you want to have a portion of your investments in alternatives. And we're just looking to democratize that. So we've actually built a vertical specific search engine, kind of like Zillow or Kayak, but rather for alternatives, which is called Vincent. And we now have the largest database of alternatives all under one roof. We have over $3 billion of our alternative investments right now today if you had a checkbook and you wanted to buy all of them in one place. So you're able to just look across the many different platforms, whether it's trading cards or cars or real estate or crypto or NFTs or Monets with art or venture or late stage venture or wine or racehorses, you name it. There's just so many different alternatives. And Vincent just gives you that one-stop shop where you could discover and diligence across all of them. One of the unique things that we see is the data as to how people, what they're interested in. So it's been, as you said, digital assets, including with crypto, have been growing definitely since January. We put out our monthly report called Vincent by the Numbers, and we've seen those numbers go up virtually every month. It's actually slowed a little bit in the last month around that. But NFTs have definitely been on the rise. Obviously, they started in around 2017 with CryptoKitty, and this is just an extension of blockchain and a type of application related to blockchain. And it's definitely a roller coaster. You're seeing highs and lows. I'm personally a big fan of NBA Top Shot with Dapper Labs, but there's lots of great NFTs that people are buying. Some I think will make a lot of money on NFTs. Others will lose a lot of money on NFTs. But I think having a diverse set of alternative investments is a smart investment for anybody.
Gotcha. So Vincent's really there for democratizing it for the retail investor. So it's no longer limited, like the Monet can no longer just be purchased by, that super rich European investor. It can be purchased by a huge group of smaller folks.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about alternatives is often they are very expensive to get into. There's been a couple of things that are happening. One, there's platforms that are going online that are now offering smaller check sizes of entry, or there's what's called fractionalizing ownership, which is taking that Monet and breaking it down into, let's say, 1,000 pieces of shares that cost $100 each or something. So there's lots of great platforms that are doing this. Masterworks is one of our partners that's doing it for art. Or like Collectible doing it with trading cards and many others.
Gotcha. So now, as we're nearing the end of our time, I just have a few more general sort of questions that I ask everyone who comes in the pod. And the first one is, obviously you've had three sort of very important points: the foundation of Indiegogo, Humbition, and now Vincent that we've talked about today. And so at any of these 3 points, sort of, what is one thing that you'd wish you had known when you were first starting out with any of the companies, the venture fund, any of those?
I mean, obviously, I've learned a lot from the early days of Indiegogo. I've made every mistake in the book. But if I would say lessons learned now that I'm a little bit older, who your partners are critical. So definitely pick partners you want to work with. This is like your best friends or like a marriage. You really are going to have plenty of arguments and challenges and debates. There'll be good days and bad days, and you want to be able to talk through all those things with your partners. Definitely focus on solving something that the customer wants. Don't try to create something that you hope the customer will desire one day and try to force it on them. Try to find something that's an issue, or when somebody says, I wish this was better, find out what they're talking about and try to fix it. So really create a product that solves people's needs. And I would say focus on finding that product market fit before you start adding more money on trying to get to more customers or more marketing. A lot of people say I don't have a good enough brand. That's why I'm not getting the results. That's usually a really big excuse that you just don't know how to get the right results yet. And more money won't solve anything.
Gotcha. So that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, my last question is, it's not related to venture or anything. It's just going to be, what's your favorite number and why is that your favorite number?
My favorite number, I use 21 a lot, just because I like that number. It was my favorite basketball player's number. It was actually the day I was born in the month. Yeah.
I'm curious, which basketball player is that?
Ooh, which basketball player is really good that was 21? Do you have any idea?
What time are we, well, like what time frame?
The 80s and 90s.
No,
Same time period as what was Michael Jordan's number?
23.
Okay. So you know that one. The same time period as Michael Jordan.
What team are we talking?
Atlanta Hawks.
Okay, no, I have no idea.
Dominique Wilkins.
Oh, okay. Okay. I had no idea he was 21.
Yeah, I'll say, just because I'm biased, probably the greatest in-game dunker of all time.
I can see that. Yeah. All
He
right.
was called the human highlight film.
Did not know that. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. Thanks for answering that question. I think that brings us to a really nice close. So, yeah. Thank you so much again for taking the time to meet with you today. Hopefully, we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Kudos to you for being so entrepreneurial and, following up and making all this happen. So, super love how, when I was younger in your age, obviously this wasn't available. So I threw my passion into sports card collecting and doing that. Having this available is super cool. So kudos to you. This is, rock star stuff.